I hope that you enjoyed the previous presentation about developing a business plan for an event. Thinking carefully about all aspects of the event as a business is a key task of a successful event planner. Another key task of a successful event planner is project management. Project management involves looking at the event that we're organising and working back from the date that the event will take place and identifying all of those activities that we need to put in place in order for the event to take place successfully. And that, in a nutshell, is what critical path analysis is. A critical path is defined as the sequence of activities that have to be completed in order for a project, and in this case the planning of the event, to be completed on time. When thinking about a critical path for an event, there are 6 steps to follow. Step 1 is what we've said already. Identify all the activities that have to be completed in order for the event to be staged, and analyse each activity to understand what each activity involves. When we're talking about activities, that will depend upon the type of event that we're planning, but typical activities could include elements within the business plan: setting the financial budget, devising and implementing the marketing strategy, developing the content for the event, and all the resources that are needed in order to stage the event. So the type of event will determine what type of activities we need to identify in order for that event to be successful. Step 2 is then thinking about the time. How long will it take to complete each of the activities? And this helps us to understand which activities will need a longer period of time to complete. Step 2, we also think about the relationships between the activities. Which activities come first? Which come second? And can any activities be carried out at the same time, simultaneously? So that's step 3, identifying the activities that can be completed simultaneously. And step 3 is really checking to make sure that the order of the activities in our project plan, that they are in a logical order, so that activity 1 takes place first, then activity 2 can continue once activity 1 has been completed. But we also need to think about challenges that we'll face in planning the event. What might be some of the potential risks and other challenges that will occur? And we have to be realistic. All events won't go according to what we're expecting to in the planning process. So we have to put in place contingencies that we can implement to get us back on track if there is a delay. So step 4, identify the risks and think about contingencies that we can put in place to get us back on track. And the contingencies really give us an opportunity to build in to the critical path slippage time, a margin of error if some of the activities take longer than expected to complete. We also need to think about the milestones. A milestone is a critical activity that we need to definitely complete in order for the event planning process as a whole to be successful. So a milestone is something that we build into the critical path, and it gives us the time to reflect on the progress that we're making to make sure that everything is going according to plan. If we get to a milestone point and we realize that not everything is progressing as it should be, we can then take action at that moment in time to get us back on track and to get us back on the progress that we need for the event to be completed and starting on the date that's scheduled. Detailed planning is essential when we're thinking about the critical path, and we need to use a technique or techniques to help give a visual representation of the critical path that we are following. And there are two main types of diagram that we can use to give this visual representation of the critical path. And we're going to talk about those in the next series of slides. We're going to be talking about the network diagram or a Gantt chart. The network diagram or Gantt chart can also be thought about as control tools that we use to monitor the progress that we're being made in preparing for the event. And we need to think very carefully about using network diagrams or Gantt charts because they give a visual representation that we can share with other people on all of the activities and stages that are important for making the event a success. We'll start off by talking about a network diagram. A network diagram is a set of boxes that represent each activity with arrows connecting the boxes in the sequence that each activity has to be completed. We can use Microsoft Project and other software applications to design our network diagram, but the network diagram has boxes for the activities with arrows connecting those activities in a flow chart so that we know we have to complete activity 1 first, then we go to activity 2, then to activity 3. So that's what a network diagram is. In order to devise the network diagram, we have to be systematic. So we have to think about each of the key activities that's needed in order to stage the event. And we can give a letter to those activities. Activity A, develop the advertising plan. Activity B, develop the promotion and training materials. If there is a predecessor for that activity, we also need to record that as well. But in addition to what we see on the screen now, we also have to allocate a time to each of these activities. How long is it going to take to complete activity A? How long is it going to take to complete activity B, C, and D? So we also need to think about the duration of each of these activities as well. And this particular part of the diagram illustrates the predecessors. So for activity I, we must complete 2 activities before we can do activity I, and for activity L, we must complete 3 activities before we can do activity L. So the analysis that we have to do before designing the network diagram is important. What are the activities? What are any predecessor activities? And how long will it take to undertake each activity? With all of that information, we can then produce our network diagram. And this is just one example of a network diagram, which shows the flow of activities that need to take place in order for our event to start on the due date and at the due time. And there's arrows connecting the boxes, in this case they're circles, and there is a time duration that's linked to the network diagram so that we know how long it's going to take to complete each of the activities in the network diagram. Another method of visualizing the critical path is through a Gantt chart. And the Gantt chart is displayed as a bar chart, with each bar representing a different activity drawn to scale according to the length of time it will take to complete the activity. So a bar chart is also a way of presenting the critical path, and it's got a different look to the network diagram. So this is a Gantt chart. We've got a whole series of activities listed on the left-hand side, in the column on the left-hand side. The blue shading indicates how long it will take for each activity to be completed, and the way in which the bar charts are configured indicates which activity has to be completed first. So the Gantt chart is an alternative to the network diagram. Critical path analysis should be used to ensure that the event starts on time and to budget. Once the critical path for the event has been designed, we can then allocate our event team to work on the different activities, and we can also allocate resources to each of the activities as well. So some of the activities, as well as the event staff, will also need certain resources, which can include a budget. So we can allocate a financial budget to the different activities to make sure that they have enough finance to enable that activity to be completed. We can also use the critical path to see if we are on schedule in terms of time, ahead of schedule, or behind of schedule. If we are behind the schedule in planning for the event, then there could well be a problem, and we need to understand what that problem is and make adjustments in order to catch up the time that we've lost. The critical path diagram is also a good way of communicating within the event team on our progress that we're making and all the stages that have to be completed in order for the event to be staged. And the progress that we record against the critical path helps with future event planning as well, because when we're organising a similar type of event in the future, we can look back on the first event that we organised to see how long it took to complete certain stages, and we can take that forward into the next event.